In the darkest corners of the internet, there are stories that lurk which would make your blood run cold. Tales of unimaginable horrors and terrifying mysteries that seem straight out of a nightmare. These are not the stuff of fiction, but real-life events that have left people both intrigued and horrified. Welcome to our channel, where today we're going to take you on a journey into the abyss. We will explore a kingdom built on a foundation of blood, betrayal, and fear. This is a place where shadows dance with secrets, and the truth lies buried beneath layers of deceit. The story begins in the heart of Europe, where two brothers named Jacob and Wilhelm ruled their kingdom with an iron fist. Their reign was one of luxury and excess, but it was also marred by a sinister undercurrent of violence and control. The brothers were known for their extravagant lifestyle, throwing lavish parties and surrounding themselves with beautiful women and adoring courtiers. But behind the facade of opulence, there was a darker side to their rule. Jacob and Wilhelm had a disturbing hobby, collecting human hearts. They would have their servants bring them freshly extracted hearts from victims, who were often chosen at random. Once they had acquired the heart, they would display it prominently in their castle, either hanging it from the rafters or placing it on pikes in the courtyard. It was a grotesque spectacle designed to send a message to their subjects. The brothers reveled in the fear that their actions inspired, seeing it as a way to maintain their power and keep their kingdom in check. One day, a young woman named Alara found herself in the crosshairs of the brutal rulers. She had done nothing to incur their wrath, yet they had taken a liking to her and decided that she would be the next victim. As the castle guards approached her home, their faces twisted into cruel smiles. Knowing that they had brought the king's justice, fear gripped Alara as she realized the fate that awaited her. She knew that once the king's men entered her house, there would be no escape. Her life was about to be extinguished, and her heart would become just another trophy in the king's macabre collection. But as the guards closed in, an unexpected twist of fate intervened. One of the guards, a man named Thomas, hesitated. He had served the king for many years and had seen firsthand the terrible things they did in the name of their twisted hobby. But he had never been able to go against them until now. Thomas had fallen in love with a woman who lived in Alana's neighborhood. He couldn't bear the thought of her being taken away and murdered. In that moment of crisis, his conscience took over, and he made a decision that would change everything. Thomas signaled to the other guards, diverting their attention and allowing Alara to escape through a secret passageway. She fled, her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that she had only seconds to get away before the king's men realized what had happened. With adrenaline surging through her veins, she ran through the winding streets of the city, desperately trying to lose her pursuers. All around her, people cowered in fear, unwilling to help her, because the king's men were merciless and would not hesitate to punish anyone who aided a fugitive. As she stumbled through the maze of narrow alleys and dimly lit squares, Alara could hear the shouts of the pursuing guards echoing behind her. They were close, and she knew she had to find somewhere to hide, somewhere the king's men would never think to look. Suddenly, she spotted an old abandoned church, its roof caved in and its walls covered in graffiti. It was a place most people avoided, believing it to be haunted. But Alara had no choice. She dashed inside, hoping to lose herself in the labyrinth of crumbling arches and broken pews. Inside the church, Alara found solace in the shadows. The dilapidated building, with its stained glass windows shattered and its statues toppled, offered her a semblance of sanctuary. Here, amidst the ruins, she could at least catch her breath and plan her next move. But as the moments passed, she knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. She needed to find a way to escape the kingdom, to flee as far away as possible from the clutches of the ruthless kings. Days turned into weeks, and Alara managed to evade the king's men. All thanks to the secret passageways that crisscrossed the city, remnants of a time when it was a bustling metropolis. Now forgotten and disused, these tunnels became Alara's lifeline, allowing her to navigate the city's underbelly unseen. The tunnels were dark and dank, the air thick with the smell of stale waste and danger lurking around every corner. But for Alara, they were a necessary means to an end. As she moved through the labyrinth beneath the city, she encountered other outcasts and rebels who had also been driven underground by the oppressive rule of Jacob and Wilhelm. Some were commoners who could no longer bear the heavy taxes and the constant threat of violence. Others were nobles who had fallen out of favor with the kings. And some were like Alara, desperately trying to escape the kingdom and start a new life elsewhere. Among those Alara met was a grizzled old man named Corvus, who had once been a guard in the king's army. He had seen the horrors of their regime firsthand and had deserted years ago, becoming a leader of the resistance movement that operated in the shadows. Corvus took Alara under his wing, teaching her how to survive in the tunnels and how to fight back against the tyranny that had gripped the kingdom. He told her about the plans underway to overthrow the kings and restore freedom to their people. Together with Corvus and the other members of the resistance, Alara began to plot her revenge against Jacob and Wilhelm. She knew that the kings had no idea she had escaped, and she intended to keep it that way. But she also knew that she couldn't stay hidden forever. She wanted to see the kings brought to justice, but she also wanted to reclaim her own life. As the months passed, Alara's resolve only grew stronger. She trained with the resistance fighters, learning how to handle weapons and how to move through the shadows unseen. She also began to understand the true extent of the oppression that had fallen upon their kingdom. Jacob and Wilhelm had not only collected human hearts as trophies, they had used fear and violence to control their people, crushing any opposition and stamping out any dissent. Finally, the day came when the resistance was ready to make their move. It was a risky plan that involved infiltrating the castle and assassinating the kings while they slept. Alara knew that if she was caught, she would be executed swiftly, and her heart would become just another prize in the king's gruesome collection. But she was determined to see the plan through to the end. That night, as the moon hung heavy in the sky, Alara and the other resistance fighters crept towards the castle. It was a perilous journey fraught with danger, but they had prepared well and managed to avoid the patrols of guards. Once inside the castle grounds, they split up, each member of the resistance taking on a specific task. Some would disable the guards, while others would search for the king's chambers. Alara, with her knowledge of the castle gained during her childhood, was in charge of finding Jacob and Wilhelm. As they moved through the labyrinth of corridors and staircases, adrenaline surged through Alara's veins. The weight of the mission pressed down on her, but she pushed on. Driven by the desire for revenge and the hope for a better future, finally, she found them in their chambers, their faces contorted in peaceful sleep. Unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows, it was a moment of truth. In a flash, Alara and the other resistance fighters struck, taking out the guards and silencing the kings. The castle erupted in chaos, with the remaining guards and servants caught in the crossfire. But the resistance was prepared for this. They'd planned for every eventuality, and the castle quickly fell under their control. Alara watched as Jacob and Wilhelm were brought before the assembled citizens, their faces now ashen and fearful. The people who had once trembled at their sight now stood tall, demanding justice for the horrors they had endured. Alara knew that there was no mercy to be had here. The kings had reveled in cruelty, and it was time for them to face the consequences. With the kings deposed and the oppressive regime brought to an end, Alara and the other members of the resistance emerged as heroes. They had risked everything to bring about change, and they had succeeded. But as the celebrations died down and the wounds of the past began to heal, Alara knew that her journey was not over. She had survived the tyranny of the kings, but now she had to rebuild her life and find her place in a kingdom that was still reeling from the horrors of its past. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but Alara was ready. She had faced her fears and had come out stronger on the other side. And as she looked towards the horizon, she knew that she was not alone. She had friends and allies who had stood by her side through the darkest of times, and together, they would shape the future of their kingdom.